What's going on, everyone? This is Brady Harrington, and you are listening to the Pump Podcast. Pump stands for Prepare Ultimate Mental Performance. This episode is brought to you by Hoop Culture. Hoop Culture is your off-the-court, unique and authentic basketball streetwear. You can use our 10% off code HCFAM-pump. I repeat, HCFAM-pump to receive 10% off your next order. If you have any questions after the episode or you want to reach out for new ideas, please reach out to Harrington, HARRINGTON, pump@gmail.com, or you can reach out to our Instagram page, PUMP_pod. I really appreciate you giving this a listen. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. This is episode 11. I got another fun one tonight. This is my guy, Drew Gardner, over here. Drew is currently the GA at Wheeling University men's lacrosse program. I know Drew personally, good high school buddy of mine, so I'm very happy that we can chop it up here tonight and talk about a lot of good stuff. So, Drew, how you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's going to be awesome. So we talked about a little bit beforehand already, but just go in a little bit, and a couple of my guests that have came on the podcast have already experienced this as well, but you going from a successful career, 2018 grad at Alfred, playing goalie there, and now getting into the game of getting into college coaching, what is your perspective so far on just athletics in general and the mental aspect? What has changed for you over time so far?
Oh, just seeing it from a different light, right? And I think that's the big thing. Being a player, going through that grind every single day. You know, you're going to class, you're working out, you're going right to practice, you're sore, you're tired at the end of the day. All right, now it's time to do homework, right? Whereas now being on the flip side of that, don't really see that as much because you only see the players a few hours out of the day.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest perspective change for me is now getting the most out of the players for the time that you have, how to do that. Because every kid's different, right? Some kids react better to, a little bit harder of coaching. Nowadays, you see some kids that are a little more sensitive to some type of coaching like that. And that's just, whether that's generational or what. The biggest change in perspective for me has been, how do I get that out of that kid? How do I get their best effort? How do I get the best mindset? How do I get their best foot forward to go? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think seeing it from the coach's perspective now, what my coaches saw in me, I was a player, to now what I see in players now. So I think the way you go about it can be a little bit different. At the end of the day, you all want the same thing, right? Coaches want their players to play their best at all times, but you realize that with the internal and external factors that are going on while you're in, let's say a 10-9 game, right? 30 seconds left. How do I get that player to perform at the highest level that they can?
Yeah, at that time, no, a lot of good stuff right there. And so, from your previous experience being an athlete, what were a couple of things that coaches did to get the best out of you? Like, what was your personal? I'm gonna make this a two-parter, actually. So, starters, it's a little bit of a loaded question, but one, what did coaches do to get the most out of you? And two, at what point in your playing career as an athlete did you come to realize that this is what it takes to get the best out of me? Because some people don't realize sometimes that, okay, maybe me getting yelled at sometimes or getting a kick in the butt might work, or other times they might think, oh, maybe if like a coach really just breaks some things down with me and slows it down, that works better to me. So I guess, yeah, for starters, what was the best way to get something out of you, and when did you realize that it was the most impactful? way of going about things.
I think it's more of know, can they depend on me? Right? I played goalie. Anybody that's played lacrosse before knows that that is a position where you are under pressure all the time. Because if you get scored on, you're the first person that they look to, right?
Yeah,
So it's having that pressure making diamonds, right? Thrived off that. I loved having the pressure of, hey, am I going to be the guy to let them score, or am I going to be the hero, right? More than likely, I'd like to think I chose to be the hero part.
yeah, throw the cape on, man. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
But the way that they got the best out of me was being hard on me. I like to be coached like that. And
Hmm.
that kind of stems from my grandfather who started the game in our hometown,
Yeah,
as you probably know.
yeah, oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
he was a coach that was never satisfied. And the no, I'm not saying he's Bill Belichick, but he kind of had that Bill Belichick mentality. Like, hey, do your job, do it right, mess up.
It's expected out of you too.
Yes,
It shouldn't come as a surprise. Drew Gardner has this amount of saves and they win the game. It should just happen.
right. In that kind of, I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm not going to pat you on the back for every single save you make, right? You got to stay locked in, keep doing what you're supposed to do, and give this team the best possible position to win, right? And I think that kind of stems from him. At a very early age, he was a guy that was, he was hard on me, but he also wanted me to be the best that I could be. Um, and I think that that's kind of how I like to be coached all the way up through the ranks. I didn't want to coach to, you know, lack of better terms, be a kiss ass, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Somebody that's like, hey, it's okay, you'll get the next one. It's all right. It's like, no, like you,
I don't need that.
yeah, exactly. It's like, this is what you did wrong. This is how we're going to make it better. Do it, right? And a lot of kids that I coach now, like that, a lot of kids can take that. I don't want to say verbal assaulting, but
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like the verbal is interaction and
yes,
coming down on them a little bit. Yep.
having that discipline to be emotionally reactive to that. Just be like, okay, I know what I did wrong. Let's see how we can fix it, and let's go from there, right? How can I be? One thing I like to preach to my players: how can we be 1% better than we were yesterday, right? Sorry, what was the second part of your question? We can edit that out.
No, okay. So just piggybacking off of it, when did you realize in your athletic career that you personally like being coached up hard and a coach that's not satisfied and always expecting more out of you? Like, was there a certain time you're like, this is who I am and this is how you're going to get the best out of me?
I'd like to think I had an exact date, an exact age, but I think it was kind of just not a choice. Um,
Yeah, it's happened all the way through.
there was a point in, I want to say about sixth grade, where I was no longer being coached by my grandfather. I was being coached by somebody else. And they kind of had a different mentality, a different way of coaching. And I, didn't favor that so much. He was always on the sidelines and he would always talk to me before and after the games of how he wanted me to perform. What he saw, because I know he'd been in the game for a long time and he was a successful coach. So I was going to take that with, like I was going to hold on to every word that he said. And, not that the other coach was doing anything wrong. He just had a different style about it that I wasn't reactive to as much, if that makes sense. So I think the big thing was, you know, I'm not playing as well on this type of coaching style. So, the other type of coaching style where they are hard on me, that's better for me as a player, right? Perform better. I'm coached like that, so that's kind of the way. That's kind of how it all transpired, right? And from there on out, it was like, hey, I want to be under a coach that's going to be like that all the time. Not really satisfied with average. Don't shoot for mediocrity. We're going to shoot for excellence, right? Striving to new lengths.
Yeah, no, it's great. And that sparks another question that I wanted to ask in regards to this coaching changes. Say starting from high school lacrosse, to the end of your college career. You've obviously experienced different coaching changes, different coaching styles. Everyone has. I mean, if you're a college athlete, you're going to get a change in coach. It's going to happen. What do you recommend to athletes on how to adjust to that? Because, like you said, going from your grandfather to the next coach is a prime example, and it's difficult. It's difficult to say move on from a very good relationship with a coach and now you're moving on to the next level and you have a new coach and sometimes you might not see eye to eye. Sometimes that coach might be too much with you in regards to getting after you or trying to see something different for you. So in a roundabout way, I want to just ask you, was the best way to go about a coaching change and how should you adapt just being an athlete doing that?
From the athlete's perspective, I think there's two big things. I think there's a certain amount of respect that you have to have for your coach and what he's
No
trying
matter
to
what. And
no
I
matter
do
what,
want to say that before
right?
you get into anything else, no matter what, you need to, whether that coach is someone you think is knowledgeable or maybe not as knowledgeable or you don't see eye to eye with them yet, you need to have a certain level of respect. But continue. I like where you're going with that.
Absolutely. You have to be open to new ideas, right? Even even as a new coach, just kind of going off that from the coach's perspective, right? You're going to coach different athletes, right? Different athletes that like to be coached in different ways. So you got to kind of be a chameleon in the business, right? At
Mm,
times.
mm.
But back to the original question, from the athlete's perspective, you got to be open to that. Having an ego as an athlete, like, hey, I know everything, right? Or I know how to do it my way. This is the way I was taught. This is the way how it is. You know, in sports yourself, you know that games are always evolving, right? The change of pace is a lot faster than what it used to be. When compared to when you and I were athletes, it seems like it wasn't too long ago, but it was a little while.
Last time me and you were teammates, it was 12 years ago, dude.
Yeah, yeah. It's from the athlete's perspective, you have to be open to that new style of coaching,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Not always going to be sunshines and rainbows. There's going to be times where you're going to butt head with what your coach wants and what you want. Always be open to that because maybe they're seeing something that you don't see, right? Their whole job as a coach is to see the game in a perspective where you know the person that's actually doing it, the athlete, might not see it that way, right? And that's all you're obsessing about if you're a good coach, right? How can we make this better? How can we make this more efficient, right? Where they might think like, oh, it's just fine the way it is, right? You know, going off that, always being open to a new coaching style. You know,
Mm,
there's
mm.
always there's always ways that you can blend that too, right? Saying that every coach should be a pushover and be like, oh well, the athlete's right, like I'm wrong.
They're
No,
doing a great job. I can't do anything for them. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That shouldn't make you as a coach. You can't shut down, right? Getting negative feedback about what you're doing. Also, from the coach's perspective, you got to be open to what they're saying too, right? It's got to be a little bit of give and take. Now, there's a certain point to that. I'm not saying you let the athletes coach,
Yeah,
right?
it can't be 50-50, obviously. But
Right.
yeah, yeah.
There's a difference between being a player's coach and um, being a coach that is not confident enough to implement their own system or their own way. We'll use a movie example. I'm sure you've seen it about 1,000 times. The movie Coach Carter, right?
Uh,
Um,
no, 999, man.
I'll give you a short synopsis here. The players they had a lot of they had a lot of not so much give and take with their coach,
Yep.
right?
Especially just like we're talking about right now, a new coach coming in and trying to turn the program around. Same thing. Yep.
And Coach Carter's big thing was, we're going to have a culturally invested team and we're going to have good culture on this team. You're not going to go out on a Saturday night and act like a fool. You're going to get your homework done. You're going to show up to practice on time. If not, you're either going to run or you're going to get cut, right? Setting that standard to where wants his players to be. In the movie, not enough players are eligible and he locks the gym, right? Cancels the game. The community's outraged by it.
Mhm.
Players are mad as well. He said, this is the standard we're going to hold up to, right? I think every coach has to have that. And, hey, I'm the coach. You're the player. You know, maybe there's some things that we can go back and forth on, and maybe we can blend that.
Yeah. Well, there's certain things you can't give in on at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah, I see your head. So no, that's great, man. Because, and I want to chime in on that as well. When a coach is laying into you and say you did something wrong, or say they're like you think they're over the top, as an athlete, you got to keep in your mind, if they didn't think you were important enough, or didn't think you were like they wouldn't. What I'm basically saying is that a coach wants waste their time on just yelling at you for no reason. They're doing all this coaching for your own good, to make you better. So if you're an athlete and you ever take coaching a wrong way, maybe how a coach worded it, or the tone in their voice, or the level they were at with you, you gotta keep in perspective that there is a reason to it. It's not just to be an asshole coach and just get after this player for no reason. They care for you. That's basically them kind of saying, "Hey, man, like I really care for you, so I'm gonna lay into you because I know you can be better." On the other side of things, you start to catch the signs. If they're not if they're not giving you any type of hard coaching and hard loving, you might be doing something wrong, and they're not giving you as much of that time because they're not seeing something in you. Or unless obviously you're doing everything perfect 100% all the time, but that's just not the case. So keep both of those things in mind, that you do want to take in all of that hard coaching as much as you possibly can, because a coach isn't just going to do that for no reason. I mean, I really don't think that. It's very rare now, in my opinion. Like, there's some type of reason behind it and some type of vision that they see. You got to at least buy into it and see where they're coming from before deflecting it or taking it the wrong way.
Kind of, bouncing off that with something that we do here, coaches.
Mm-hmm.
We'll lay into guys if we call it quote unquote warranted, right? We're not going to lay into somebody just because, they were a little slow. Only if we know it's something that they can control,
Yes. Yep.
they can improve on. If we know they're not playing up to their potential, we've seen them play 100 times before. We know that they're
Yeah,
slack.
you know at that point if they're at a good level that day or not.
Right. And that's kind of a big thing that we have here, having that competition aspect, but also making sure that, the players are giving it their all the time.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. No, all that's great. And last thing before we kind of turn the page a little bit on all of this, just us personally getting into the season is very exciting. Getting into that. Now you're only getting a couple practices in before to the next game, and you're in the road and everything like that. From your perspective, I'm a winter sport, you're a spring sport. We're kind of on different opposite ends of the spectrum. What is, I guess, just a spring sport grind, the off season and into the season? How do you keep a level head, and how do you manage to make your lows not too low?
Mm-hmm.
Of
No, and it's something that we have struggled with personally as a program. It's consistency, right? In the fall, we only practice a few times a week, practicing every day. We do lifts 3 times a week, practice 3 times a week, and then those days are either a positional day where we are, lightly passing the ball around, working on our own stick work, and then another day is for conditioning. So we're making sure that our bodies are in tip-top shape. But the way Division Two is monitored is there you only have a certain amount of time where you can do that. You only have 45 days from the start of the season to do that. And then after that, you get cut down to 8 hours a week that you are allowed to be with the team voluntary. Now, guys can always do involuntary work if they want to do some stick work, if they want to do some agility stuff. They can reach out to us and do that on their voluntary own time. It's very hard, and we're kind of in that part of the fall ball where we're not looking forward to any games for the rest of the semester. There is going to be a month where you're off campus, where you have to kind of put in your
you
own
got to put your own work in. Yep.
time. Make sure that your sticks are sharp, that your body's right, that your mind's right. That's not something that's talked about enough. Having that release, right? So, and this is something that I've reiterated to the players a few times these last few weeks is like stay locked in as much as you can, right? Because if you let your mentality kind of float away, like season's 2 months away, like I can
Yeah,
put
I can lax up a little bit. Relax, not lacrosse. But yeah. So, what makes a certain situation? So you talked about locking in and kind of taking a couple days off and thinking since the season's so far away. Speaking of like warranting everything, is there a certain limit that you might look at a player and be like, okay, you had your off day, you kind of relax a little bit, come back ready to go tomorrow. Do you guys as a program, or have you dealt with that as a player, where it's like, okay, we'll give you that pass, so to speak, but let's not let that happen again for a certain amount of time?
from being a player at the Division 3 level. Once we were done with our fall ball scrimmage, which was usually October ish, mid late October, we were done. Didn't practice anymore. You only had to work out. Didn't have positionals unless it was voluntary. So that's a little bit different from the Division 3 to the Division 2 level. That's kind of one of the biggest changes I've seen. Is there's a little bit more. I don't want to say commitment because there's obviously a lot of Division 3 players that are super committed to their sport. Not a shot at D3. I love D3. I'm a big fan of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Uh, there is a little bit more of a mandatory commitment at the Division 2 level.
Yes.
For guys to stay locked in, I think it's just a constant reminder of, hey, where do we want to be? Do you want to be a team that goes 500 and skates into the playoffs and has a first round exit? Or do you want to be a team that's special, right? Do you want to be a team that can take this program to the next level, right? Kind of a little history on Wheeling. 4 years ago or so, program kind of got a reboot. The last 3 years have been kind of leading up to last season, which we went
Yeah.
500 and made the conference playoffs for the first time in 6 years. So, we've kind of made that steady incline to where it is now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now the expectation is we're going to playoffs. Now the expectation is we're gonna be
Our
in the
set right there. Don't go below it. Yep.
we're gonna be in the final dance, right? The expectation is that we want a championship. We have the talent, we have the guys now, we have the culture. That's just kind of something that's been in the process for the last 4 or 5 years. And now we're at that point where, hey, this is the expectation. I said it in our first meeting in the fall, actually, this being my first year here, I've done the research, I've done the history. And word for word, guys, we are not a rebuild program anymore. We are now a team that is looking to be that dark horse, right? We're that team that nobody's, really expecting us to be great, but we know what we have in this locker room. We know that what we have talent wise. We're trying to make that next step, right? So that's kind of a constant reminder. Last year when I wasn't here, they had a heartbreaking overtime loss in the playoffs. That stings a lot for the returners. Anytime I kind of see him slacking or I kind of see him, kind of dog walking it, I'll kind of throw it in as a little,
Little reminder.
yeah, just a little extra motivation. Like, hey, remember what happened last year? Remember when you guys took a play off and it completely screwed your season, right? You don't want that again, right? You guys remember that feeling, that gut wrenching feeling, and I'm sure a lot of the athletes, coaches that are going to watch this know that feeling where you lost.
Everyone has that. If you mention a gut wrenching feeling right now in sports, everyone has their one feeling. You can immediately think of just like that.
That one game where you had it right here and you let it slip, right?
Hmm.
So I think that should be a definite motivator for this time of year. It's like, hey, this isn't the time to just go screw around and put the sticks away for 2 months. This is the time where you're either going to be an average team or you're going to be a championship team, and the work that you put in now is going to propel
Make that difference. Good, awesome, man. And you talked about Division 3, Division 2 level. So you have scholarship players on your team. In your opinion, so far, just being around that, and you've seen it before, just like as an athlete, or like maybe even doing visits on different campuses. Do you think a scholarship is sometimes a negative motivator? in sports, and comparably to, it's a little bit weird to compare, but say a player out of high school receiving a scholarship to play, and also say a professional level player like an NBA player, for example, getting that new contract, getting that re-sign of whatever 4 years for whatever million per year. Like, do you think athletes that receive that gratitude of what they've been striving for, that money, not all of it obviously because they love the game, but the money or the scholarship, do you think that sometimes has an athlete like plateau since they got what they're supposed to get, and that doesn't push them to get to another level and even better themselves more, even though they got what they wanted?
I know I think that's a great question. Going into the Division II model, you can do academic scholarship, athletic scholarship, and
Yep,
then
yep.
whereas Division III, it's just FAFSA and academic. From my perspective, would have loved to have had that pressure, right? I talked about it a little bit before, that athletic scholarship pressure. Like, hey, if you don't perform at the way we want you to perform, we can take this away, right? We have that power. Now, luckily, that's something that we haven't had to do at all, if any, right? I think it should be a motivator, right? And that comes down to the player, right? Are you a person that's mentally strong and say, hey, like, this is what coach is investing in me, I have to give that back? Or are you going to be someone that's like, oh, this is a lot for me, like I don't know if I can do this, and you almost start to second guess yourself, kind of like a guy that's sitting right behind you, Kobe, right? Having that Mamba mentality.
Mm,
Oh, I'm just going to go out there and do my thing, right? I'm going to be a killer. I think that comes down to the psychology of a player, right? Are you going to let that pressure crumble you, or you're going to let it make you a diamond, right?
yep.
And I think that's an important thing, right? And you kind of see players' true colors about at that point. Everything's going right. It's easy to be happy. It's easy to be a great player, right? But when things start going wrong, you're not having great practices. We call it the athlete funk, right? They get into a funk for
Yep, yep, yep.
whether that's a week, whether that's a month, whether that's a whole semester.
Yeah, everyone's had their different experiences with it before.
I know I've had mine, in the
Hmm,
past.
hmm.
It's hard to get out of that, right? It's hard to get yourself in a place mentally where it's like, I am a good player. Like, I just got to start doing it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The athletic scholarship stuff, that should put a little pressure on you, but it shouldn't put so much pressure on you that you can't perform, right? Personally for me, I would have loved to have had that pressure. Like, that is something that can go up. Academic scholarships can't go down; it can only go up. But athletic scholarships can go up or down. Like, you know, for our players, we always tell it to them like this: like, hey, this is almost like a privilege, right? And playing college lacrosse is a privilege, but having that
Absolutely.
scholarship, having that investment into you, you know, that can be a gift or it can be a curse, right? It's up to you as a player. Are you going to put in that extra work and make yourself better? Or are you going to be, oh, no, I'm good. Coach gave me this. I'm
Styles
completely
right here. Yep,
good.
yep.
And where you see that plateau effect, right? I think that the money part of it definitely can have some sort of effect on that. I also think that the mentality of the player is a huge part of that too, right? Are you the guy that's going to, on the weekends when we're not, you're not mandatory training, mandatory practice, mandatory lift? Are you going to put in that extra time to make sure that you can give yourself the best possible chance for that number to go up? Right? Or if you get a really good scholarship, stay right where it's at, right?
Okay, okay, yeah. And having that privilege and opportunity comes, like you said, a lot of pressure. And I like your approach and way of going about it. And the example, kind of like the first time I really got to understand pressure and how to go about it and how to manage it, is really just learning. learning a lot and even reading, like we talked about. And I read a book called Toughness. It's one of the probably top books for college basketball coaches or just basketball coaches in general. But Toughness by Jay Billis, and I remember him just talking about his free throw routine, about when he went to the free throw line. A lot of people think, oh man, like what's going to happen if I miss this? What, like, man, I got to make sure I don't miss this shot. And if I miss this shot, then this could happen. But his take when he was a player, what he started to learn was going to make the shot, like even telling yourself, like, I'm going to make the shot. When I make the shot, we're going to do this. When after I make the shot, when we get a stop here, we're going to win the game. Like everything has to be in your mind, mentally thinking, I'm going to make this, instead of, oh, if I miss this team could hit a three to tie the game and go into overtime. Like that difference. And where I'm going with that is, and kind of it reminded me like when you talked about how you accepted pressure. And what I wanted to ask is, how can every athlete, especially like we said, the scholarship kids, once you play at a professional level or any level to get money, I mean, you are being paid or you're getting a scholarship to perform. And after a while, like, I mean, I reference it to these big time players that get that huge paycheck, and everyone starts questioning what Trevor Lawrence, for example, he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, right?
Yeah, it might
One,
be
or he's up.
in love though.
I mean, yeah, your Jordan Love might be up there too, but
You kind of see it with him, right? Last year he was on a 1 year deal. It was, hey, you either make it,
well, I heard it.
and he thrived under that pressure in the second half of the season, not so much the first half. But then this
Yeah,
year he got the $220 million contract, and he's kind of doing one of these. He's kind of going up
yep,
and down. They're
yep,
solid, but when you get that kind of like that safety net, I feel like that Mamba mentality goes away, right? It's can either overperform or underperform. Either way, I'm still getting the money. Um, I've got that safety.
yeah. Because yeah, having that on the other end of things too, I feel like since you have that privilege and opportunity and you received whatever reward for how gifted, talented, skilled you are, after a while, it's like if you're not performing, looking at things, thinking, okay, now I'm starting to disappoint others and I'm starting to let my teammates down, especially for expectations of me and what I do. So, what I wanted to ask you is any outside factors that come into before playing a game. How do you get to that mind state of, no matter what I do, there shouldn't be, like, basically don't set any expectation for yourself. And if there is, and especially in big moments that you need to rise to the occasion, like you talked about, being the hero or being the guy letting up the goal, how do you accept those failures? And how do you accept that success as well?
Yeah, I think there's two things that really come to mind when you ask that question. When it comes to the mentality of pressure, right? That all comes from your practice, right? And kind of your upbringing too, right? Don't take the short road. Don't take the easy route. Go to the hardest tournaments. Play the toughest teams. Put yourself in that situation as much as possible. So when that situation does arise,
You're
I've
ready.
been right. This isn't anything new to me. Now, obviously, if you're in a rebuilding team and you're trying to make a run to the playoffs, or you're in the playoffs and you're trying to make a run to the championship, it's like, okay, how are they going to react knowing that this is a new situation? Um, the second part of that comes from a little bit more sports psychology, as strength and conditioning coach as well. On our test, there was a whole chapter on sports psychology, and it talked about the inverted U theory. So, for those listeners that don't know what the inverted U theory is,
I don't know it either, so I'm very excited to learn now.
you take a lesson right now, right?
I know I'm pumped now.
It's having the right amount of excitement or arousal and lead to the best performance. So you got your performance, your arousal, right? Kind of that X and Y, right? So this is how the graph goes. You start here, come up all the way to the top, and then you've got your center point in the middle. And as you get more arousal, your performance starts to go down. So basically, if you're not excited about a game enough, if you're like, it's just another game, like whatever, whatever happens, happens. If you don't have that, your performance is going to be low. You're just excited enough about it, but you're not too excited. That's the point at the top of the upside down U, where you're going to have the best performance, but you're also going to be calm, cool, and collected, right? And then at the second half, where our performance starts going down, if you're too excited, if you're too jittery, if this moment is too big for you, your performance isn't going to be great either.
Okay. Okay.
And it discusses, is how do we get our athlete to that tippy top point? How do we get them to the top of the upside down U?
Yep. Keep them level-headed. Keep them where they need to be.
And again, that comes down to the athlete. I was a guy, on a personal note here, I was a guy that really thrived off the music that we listened to before games. I mean, you remember, I always liked to DJ our warm-ups for basketball.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
I got that.
always did the same. I always took requests from you, though. I always did that for football, for basketball, and for lacrosse. In college, I did it for lacrosse as well. I was a guy that liked to get a little amped. Even during pregame, like when I wasn't like doing my warm up, my other college athletes will definitely know what I'm talking about. I like to just kind of move around. I like to dance a little bit. I like to be loose.
Yeah.
When I was loose, when I was feeling good, when I was hearing music I liked, I played the best. If I was too amped up for a game, I played worse. If I was like, goodness, like if I let one goal in, like my mentality is gonna break. The looser I played, but not too loose, right? I still had like, hey, this is an important game. I'm trying to help my team win in any way possible. If I was looser, I know I felt better. And I think it's the same way for coaching too, right? If you're too jittery, you can't think about what strategy you're going to implement into the game. If you're, me and the head coach here, we have conversations about this all the time. When we create a game plan, that's usually a pretty well thought out process. And I know you can probably attest to this too, right? You're scouting a team hard for, 3 to 7 days, right? You kind of peek at them throughout the season, right? But when that time comes, like, hey, in 4 days we're playing this team, right? You're looking at everything that they do, from their tendencies to what their players do to how their coach reacts when they have a good play or a bad play, right? You're analyzing everything. When we create a game plan, it's a very well thought out process, right? Now, if that game plan doesn't work in the first quarter, are you going to be a coach that's like, oh,
Don't panic and throw it all away. Yep.
Or are you going to say, hey, this is what we need to do to keep going with that game plan? Trust me, it's going to work. And then eventually, it starts working, right? Obviously, there's always adjustments that you have to make, whether that's at halftime, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, whatever it is, right? There's always adjustments that you have to make. If you're too like, okay, scratch that, let's do something else. Let's completely change it. Let's go from
They just all over the place and unorganized.
Let's go from a 2-3 zone to a full court press for the rest of the game, right? How does that look for your players if even the coach isn't calm, right? And that's
you need to be the calming presence. You have to be, if you're the guy that's looked at, you're the girl that's looked at, you need to be the calming presence, and everyone can look to you and know we're confident, ready to go, and are still sticking to the game plan.
Absolutely. Because if things start going bad, you're screaming at your players, meanwhile they're screaming at their teammates. It's just a bad negativity, toxic environment, right?
Yes,
sports, it's never always going to go your way, right? But how are you going to react to that? How are you going to do the push-pull, right? Kind of what I like to talk about. If we're getting pushed in a different direction, how are we going to pull ourselves back to that equilibrium, right? Or are we going to get settled in? And maybe it just takes like one good play, right? Good face off to a transition to a goal. Okay, the momentum's back on our side now. All right, let's take a breath. Let's focus on what we need to do. and how are we going to attack it? Right.
No, that's all that is. I mean, all that is great because, and going back to originally when you're talking about you as a player and handling the pressure, everyone has their own way. So, like with you, you had your music, you had being loose, doing your own thing, and then settling into the game. You weren't too jacked up for the game, but at the same time, you were still locked in and knew what you had to do. And everyone needs to find their way. And I recommend to athletes that try different ways.
Mhm.
I know it sounds a little weird to like kind of trial and error, but you need to figure out and even mentally know what worked for you, what had me at a calming presence, also what routine and strategy had me nervous and too jittery, but also I feel like some people try to be too cool, too calm, and too cool and collected. But all of a sudden, like you doing that, you're not prepared. And the first couple of minutes, you're like, oh, shit. Like that just hit me in the face. And I didn't even think of like, you still didn't use any strategy, like just mental imagery for the game, or you were just trying to be too cool for the situation, basically act like you're not a human, you're not nervous. Like there's so many different ways where you can kind of go outside the realm of preparing. You got to make sure you find your own way. And on top of that, what you talked about was scouting and game planning and everything like that. It's funny to think because obviously, like for our team doing it this weekend, we had back to back game over the weekend. We had time to prepare for the first team. Second team, we didn't know who we were going to play yet, and you had to still be prepared either way for one team or the other and need to kind of on the fly right when your game ends and you know who you're playing, you need to jump to the next team. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is when is it too much when you're game playing for another team? Because I know usually, I mean, prep school and high school they do get into that. I know some teams focus on that more than others, or some don't even at all. But at the college level, when is it almost too much that like you're over focusing on a team, over analyzing too much, and then you forget about your own team all of a sudden, and you're so worried about like if our team's playing Wheeling University basketball, and the whole week we just been constantly talking about, all right, number two can do this, number four can do that, and we get into the game and we're looking around like, wait a second, like we're so worried about what they do, they're taking us out of our game now. So where's the fine line at of because I've been told this before what in my very first coaching job saying, hey, Brady, you're I think we're a little too worried about what they do. Like we need to focus on ourselves and execute what we do. What's the cutoff point of over preparing for another team, worrying about them too much?
That's a great question.
Because I don't know personally. I don't know the line. I mean, I've came across it before and I know when to stop, but it's hard to find that, you know.
I've been on both ends of the spectrum as a player, like where our coaches talked about a team and they overhyped them, and even overhyped, just talked about them all week instead of us. What are we going to do to combat those strategies, combat those players, right? How are we going to
Mm-hmm.
against it, right? Number 5, he's got a great shot. Number 6, he's super slippery and he can get to the rack easily. Number 7, he's a 3-time All-American. He can shoot 100 miles an hour, right? I wish there was a mathematical or scientific way to break it down of what's too much and what's too little.
A good balance between focusing on your team and the other team.
Exactly. You don't want to make it seem like this team is impossible to beat, but you
Yep.
also don't want to make it seem that this team's just going to roll over and die, right? It's kind of meeting in the middle there. We'll take an example. Say it's a Wednesday and you play on a Saturday, right? Wednesday, you want your team to look at the film all together, right? Hey, this is what they're doing. This is what they're going to try and get you to do. Here's the players that we really got to watch out for. These are their studs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go over what they do, kind of that scout, right? That scout look. I think Thursday, you want to talk about more about what you want to do, right? Kind of break it up into days. Now,
Okay.
12 hours to prepare for it, that comes down to, hey, have we played against something similar to this, right? Do they run a motion offense? They run, 2-man game or a pick and rolls on one specific side? Do they really like it? Do they really like to get to this player, right? Is this the guy that they're looking for every single time they come down the court, right? Because that's easy. You just shut down that one player and then the rest of them beat you, right? But I think that Thursday, you'd want to focus on more of what you want to do, right? Hey, we're going to go into a zone defense. We're going to pressure, number 3 when he has the ball, right? Because we know that his stick handling skills and his passes and shots aren't as good as everyone else's, right? We're kind of going to hone in on that guy. That guy's cross guys that are listening right now, they'll know what I'm talking about when we say that's the fish, right? That's the guy who can't handle. He can't handle the pressure.
Oh,
Right?
okay. I like that. I like that.
But, I mean, you can basketball crew. Hey, number 3's the
Yeah, I
fish.
was about to say I might have to use that terminology with my guys. That's the fish right there. We want him to take the shot, or we want him to dribble the ball.
Right, exactly. It's you know what a team's strengths and weaknesses are, right? And then Friday's got to kind of be a culmination of everything, right? Hey, offense, you're going to go in. This is the play you're going to run. We're not going to tell the defense what play you're running, but we're just going to tell them, right, to the best of their abilities. And this is more defensive oriented here, right? It's like, hey, you left this shot wide open. We don't want to let this shot up. We want to let this shot up, right? Basketball and lacrosse are very similar in terms of their defensive concepts, right?
Yeah. No, just are you talking right now about a couple things? I'm like, oh, we kind of say the same thing.
Mm-hmm. The defensive coach, former defensive player, you're always going to give up something. But what are you going to give up? Are you going to give up the 3-point from 35 feet, or are you going to give up the 2-foot layup? Right? Are you going to give a shot in the inside, or are you going to give up a shot from the outside? Well, we want to give up a shot from the outside because it has a less percentage of scoring. 2, our goalie has a better percentage of saving that shot versus a shot from 5 yards away, right? We're going to give up the 15-yard shot versus the 5-yard shot. Same thing with basketball, right? Are you going to let him shoot threes, or are you going to let him get in the paint? Now, obviously, you got Steph Curry on the other team. That's kind of pick your poison, right?
Yeah. That's something I don't want to ever worry about, and I won't. Thankfully. That's
right. I think it's got to be a culmination of, hey, this team is solid. They've got good players, right? But you also don't want to make them seem like they're the best all-star team to ever walk here. It's kind of a mixture.
Yeah, that just drops your guys' confidence. If you just play them off too good, and like we're probably not going to win this, we're not expected to win this.
Then that comes into the underdog mentality too, right? Hey, everyone wrote us off except us, right? So let's go out there and play with some house money, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you don't give a shit, sometimes you play better, right? If you go play a team where it's like, hey, they're top 20 in the country,
no expectation, just go in and play.
Just go out and play. Don't think about it too much. And that's where the U theory comes in. If you're thinking about it too much, chances are you're going to mess up more. If you're not thinking about it enough, you're not going to make the right decisions. Where can we meet in the middle at the top of that upside down U, right? And the same thing goes for coaching. Like I said, how are we gonna make sure that these guys know and that we know this is an important game and we're gonna perform. We have to perform well, but we also don't want to undersell it or oversell it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just have that. There's a lot to it, but overall, having that fine line of we got to control what we can do first, and also be smart enough to pick up on their tendencies and go about our thing. So
another thing, just to add to that real quick, is obviously as you get farther along in the season, now you're getting into the playoffs, right? Now everyone knows, like, hey, this is an important game. We don't win this, we're going home, right? So that's kind of that external pressure that might be added. For me, as a coach, as a former player, you really do have to treat it like just another game, right? You hear guys talk about before they go in the Super Bowl, right? That, it is the Super Bowl, right? Everyone's watching it. But in terms of your preparation, in terms of your mentality as an athlete, as a coach, you have to treat it like just another important game, but not oversell it too much. because you get the jitters, right?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome, awesome. No, and that's why it's good. Like what I like to have out of you is that obviously athlete perspective and also coaching as well. You know, seeing having all those experiences now, it's good to pass down to the current athletes now as much as we can, much as we can do. Either who you're coaching or who you can spread the word to about how you can just make your experience as best as possible. Because like we just talked about, me and you were teammates 12 years ago, just like that. Like you got to make the most of everything you get to do and the privilege of playing the sport. So all this is great. So last but not least, and I want to start something new that we talked about, kind of having a new segment and here and there. I think I need to take recommendations for the name selection on this, but I'll use basketball terms for now. Kind of like the bonus, like the 1-and-1 in basketball. This is called the 1-and-1. All right, so this is basically the last question or the last go about for things. So last thing I wanted to ask you, and this is branching off to a whole nother segment, just kind of like one little clip of something to talk about, and that's mentioned a lot. There's a lot of names for it. You can call it whatever you want, but the art of, some people call it chirping, trash talking, shit talking, smack talk, you name it. Everyone's got a different name for it. But overall, the art of just talking trash. Was your overall take on it? And I think it's different for every sport. Look, like I feel like lacrosse
There's
chirping.
there's a
Yeah, oh yeah, I bet. And I think lacrosse chirping, baseball, basketball chirping, you name it. It's all different. What's just your overall thoughts on it? And as an athlete, seeing it as a coach now, what's good about it? What's bad about it?
before I go into if it's a positive or negative thing, for me, I was never a huge smack talker. Because mainly because I didn't want to put my own foot in my mouth, right? Well, like I said, I was the guy. If we got scored on, they were the first one to look at me, right? Hey, why didn't you save that, right? Oh, and that's part of the game, right? I was never a huge smack talker. I'd say a little thing here and there, but I wasn't a guy that was like, hey, that's a muffin. Like that's something we say when it's not a great shot. It's a soft shot.
That's a muffin. Okay, okay, yeah,
That one back, right? I was more of a guy that was like, hey, I'm going to let my play do the talking. There was one
yep,
time
absolutely.
I can think of the specific moment. We were playing a college game at Alfred, and we were playing Baldwin Wallace. I scored on. The whole bench basically erupted, and something my lacrosse guys know what they're saying. They say turn and rake. So the goalie turns around, rakes up the ball, gives it back to the ref, right?
Okay,
We got the ball maybe 10 seconds after that, and former player at Alfred, a good friend of both of ours, Jake Lynch, he sniped the top left corner.
not surprised whatsoever.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember it being pretty silent after everyone cheered, and I just let out a huge turn and rake. That whole bench, because I was by their bench, they were like, okay, okay. Well, the one time I opened my mouth, they came down and they got an easy one-on-one look, and you can probably imagine the whole bench erupted and was like, hey,
They probably had you. They probably had you after. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ate my own words on that one. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to celebrate after we win, but I'm not going to talk before, because I'm just somebody who, I'm going to let my play talk for me, right? I'm not going to get into that whole, like, that mental battle, right? I've already got enough
Yeah.
on my plate. I'm just going to focus on saving the ball and making sure we can win the game, right? It comes down to the player. As a coach now, seeing as we have a lot of Canadians on our team, and they do love to talk. Um,
Yeah.
there's one specific player on our team I can think of, and he just goes, "No, that's you better cover me better next time, buddy." Right?
Yeah, yeah,
And slick like that, or a couple of our guys, like they'll be running down the field with the ball, and they'll just get whacked on the arms, but they'll still have the ball, and they'll just be like, "What are you doing there? Like, figure it out." Like,
yeah.
little things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Nothing. It's not like you're like directly like personal towards them. You're just like kind of messing with them.
It should never be, personal or anything like that, unless the two know each other from high school. Then it might get a little bit more personal because they know each other, right? It can be a good thing for a player. It can also be a bad thing, right? I know that's kind of the easy answer, but it depends.
Yeah,
It depends on the person. So there's some guys that talk smack, and it like excites them, right? It makes them want to play better because they're like, okay, I talked now. Now I have to prove it, right? Now I have to back. And there's some guys that they won't say a word. They'll just let their play do the talking, and they probably know themselves well enough where if they get into a chirping match with somebody, um, that it can decrease their performance because they're so caught up in talk
yep. Can't get caught up in it.
that they can't they can't think about what they're trying to do, right?
Hmm.
Kind of lose focus on the game and they focus more on the you know mental side of it, right? Like, hey, am I going to try and get in this person's head, or am I actually just trying to play good defense here, and help my team win, right? And I've seen it go both ways. Guys that I'm coaching right now, right? I've seen guys that they talk smack and they play better. I've seen guys that talk smack and then they get burned and then they kind of shut down, right? So you have to know yourself well as a person. For me, it was a little bit here and there, but nothing egregious. Like, hey, hey, you got him next time, there, buddy, or something small like that.
I'm just yeah, kind of little like kind of like nibble at them.
Against guys that I knew in high school or guys that I played against in high school, and like always give them a little chirp, but it was never anything egregious. Like I was smiling when I said it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Anyone like, hey, did you gain a little weight there? Or something like that. Just like messing with them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or I think, and I think this one actually helped me is I try and be like almost overly nice to them. Like, hey, how you doing? How like how's the family? How's everything going? And then I stuff them, and I'm just like, yeah, I like you, but I don't like you that much.
No, I mean that's the funny part to it, man. It's like there's so many different options and variety of ways to just the fun art of just talking and communicating with the other team of like just seeing in basketball today, like seeing on the court, yeah, things are going to get competitive, and there's another team that's trying to take what's yours. And at the end of the day, obviously, you're doing it for you should be at least doing it for the joy of it and everything. So, I mean, like you said, everyone's different, and it's crazy to think of just like all the different ways of, I guess, like going from the most negative way of someone that takes it too personal and gets fed up in it, and that costs the team. And even basketball, for example, with technical fouls, talking too much, or getting out of hand, and that could lead to something even physical. But I think I'm not going to sit here and act like an angel and say I think it should never happen. You should never do that. I mean, I think that spices things up, but you need to know yourself and know what's best for you. Like you said, you were at your best when you kind of let your play do the talking, because letting your play doing the talking, especially for guys that want to get into you and talk a little shit and get you a little riled up. And if you just don't say anything and you're going out there and you're scoring on them and you're doing your thing and you're staying level headed and it's not affecting you, that frustrates them. That really gets to someone that's trying to get to you, and you can't. So like sometimes like people want to get that out of you, and like once you like lash out and do something, they're like, oh, like now we're smelling the blood. That's what we want. That's what we want out of you. And other parts to it too. Like I think there are, especially like the more mature college players and the professional players, they have that talk where like they know between the both people it isn't something that you are going at them and you're genuinely like furious with. It's more of like I'm like, I mean, these two right here are one of the best at doing it. They're it definitely changed things. It's not like it just wasn't nothing. They did it in a way where, and it could have been different for every player. It could be like going at one player being nice to them, like you said, but then the next player, it's like get into them, letting them know what you just did to them, that you crossed them over and got a bucket, or you got a big block on them. So um, I think overall the art of trash talk, you need to make sure, I guess, at the end of the day, that if you're getting it to the point where it is affecting your team negatively or you individually in a negative way, try a different way, or resort back to just letting your play doing the talking, focus on yourself and communicating with your teammates. But at the same time, I mean, I especially like when I'm still playing here and there, like I love doing it. It keeps the game. It's enjoyable when you're going back and forth with someone that it's at kind of like a good level of things aren't getting too chippy or personal, and at least something negative for the game, because that's not what people that are watching want to see. That I guess the good spectators don't want to see that. Some want to see the fights and the chippiness, and that like gets them riled up. But you want to just keep that back in mind. I think it's cool how everyone does it in their own way, and they get it either that coming to them can lower their confidence or it gets more out of them. And also, you going at someone else, everyone just going about their different way in the funny ways, like you said, the Canadians, how they're just kind of goofy about it, or some of my guys just playing basketball, like they'll get after someone, they'll let them know about it. So I enjoy every last bit of it. It's cool to look at.
I think an important part about it is making sure that you're keeping that competition level high, right?
Yes.
You're doing it to get that competition out of you. Like, oh, he said something about this. Like, I'm going to show him. See, that was personally one of the best feelings I had playing sports is when it was unprovoked chirping to me, and then I was like,
yeah.
Kind of like Jordan. I took it personal, right? Now
Yeah.
I'm going to show him that I am. I am.
That's when you truly. I think that's the best part to it is when you obviously the classic scoreboard, like letting the scoreboard doing the talking, letting whatever came about the play. That you can't argue that. You can't argue performance. Numbers don't lie.
Can I recite to you probably the best chirp I've ever heard?
Please.
We scrimmaged the WVU club team this year, right? Now with club teams, they do take it seriously. At a certain point, they're it's just more like frat kids. They like kind of play lacrosse on the side, right?
Yeah.
Not dedicating their whole summer, winter to get their bodies in the best shape, right?
Yeah. All the NCAA teams are.
Things started getting chippy, which it always kind of does with that game, just because they're both West Virginia teams. It's like, hey, who runs the state really, right? Even though they are a club team, I will give them their props. They did have some talented kids. Kids that are like, hey, like, I want to just go play for fun. I don't want to take it seriously. I don't want to, try and go to like a national championship or anything like that, right? I'm going
to
the standard instead of this, right? Of our guys, the same guy that I was talking about earlier, he was on the sideline taking a breather. He had just coming off from the field, and the guys from the WVU bench were chirping him, and I don't exactly remember what they said, but they were saying something like, "Oh, you're Division II, like you're not that good." He looked at him and he said, "Go get me a beer, pledge." That one was a good one. Now there was a better time and place for it, but that one I kind of like put my head down and smirked a little bit, and I was like, "Hey, that was actually pretty good."
Just the fun stuff to the game right there, man. Everyone kind of taking shots at each other.
It kind of sparked the game, right? Now it's like, hey, we're playing, we're trying to embarrass each other a little bit.
Yeah.
It creates that friction, right? That competitive edge that you like, right? When you see a game, but you don't want to see it get to a point where people are punching each other or slash.
That's just too personal. It gets out of control, and
yeah.
it's not good.
You're hurting your reputation. You're hurting your team. That's where it can come to a negative point. But everything up to that point, like honestly, I used to be super against it because I'm like, this isn't part of the game. Just play the game. But now, as a coach, like I don't mind it that much, as long as it stays at a certain level. As long as it doesn't get up here, I actually do like it. It's part of the game.
Part of the game. It's part of the game. Makes things interesting, and sports in general are just a fun way to not only get to know people and just go on there and play, getting good exercise, but like it's also a fun way just to another way of knocking at one another, messing with each other, and doing everything along those lines with either your teammates or once you're playing on the floor against another team. It's just sports gives you that outlet of doing that because you can't just walk up to someone on the street and start busting their balls for no reason. In between the lines, it's another fun way of just what's the most you can get out of yourself, and then how others are trying to get that from you, and that's the best part about just competition in general. The art of chirping is one of them. So, hey, this was all of them are special. Episode 11, special in its own way. I mean, good catching up with you as well. On top of that, I feel like we haven't talked in a long time, so this was kind of a 2-for-1, getting a good episode in and catching up with one another. But, ladies and gentlemen, Drew Gardner, assistant men's lacrosse program at Willing University. Really appreciate you hopping on, man. This was awesome.
Appreciate it, Brady. This is catch up with you, man. I followed your journey for the last 4 or 5 years. You getting into coaching, definitely as a kind of a big brother. I'm really proud of how far you've come, man.
Yeah.
And this is that you're chasing your dream with this podcast stuff, doing great coaching. It was great to catch up with you as a personal friend too. There is one more thing I want to throw in there just before we sign off here. I hope your guests take this as seriously as I do. Kind of want to start the trend of, the Brady Harrington Book Club. Aaron Rodgers has his own. I figured, why not Brady Harrington have that? This is a book that I recommend to coach out there, any level, JUCO club, Division 1 through 3, high school, whatever it is. That is this one here, and it's called In the Locker Room First. And it talks about the 7 C's on building a winning team on business, sports, and life. There's a lot of great stuff in here. The 7 C's: care, commitment, connect, communicate, contagious, consistent, and culture, right? Those aspects of life and sports that we deal with as coaches, as players, how to excel in all those different areas, right? I haven't finished it yet, but it is a great read so far. Smith, former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, he's a big one in this. Basically just talks about, kind of mentality you need to take as a coach to help you, and kind of the stuff that we were talking about earlier in the podcast. So here's number 1 for the Brady Harrington Book Club.
There you go. I'll post the links on them and everything. Yes. Get them out to people, and that'll be good. So awesome. Well, Drew, thanks again, brother. Really appreciate it. And yeah, get that book going too, man. Anyone can learn from that. Right. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So thanks again. Episode 11 was a good one. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their day to give the Pump podcast a listen. Please give us a follow on Instagram or TikTok at pump_pod. You can also tune in on our YouTube or Spotify channels. Last but not least, if you have any questions, comments, concerns on any of the episodes or future episodes coming up, please email harringtonpump@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for listening and hope you can tune in soon.